West Memphis, Arkansas. A town where life moved at a slower pace, a place where neighbors knew each other. This peaceful existence was shattered on May 5, 1993. Three 8-year-old boys vanished. Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers disappeared. They had been playing in the fading light of a spring day. Their family's worst fears were realized the next day. The boys' bodies were discovered in a drainage ditch. The location was a wooded area known as Robin Hood Hills. It was a place where children played, now a scene of unimaginable horror. The boys had been brutally murdered. Their bodies were bound with their own shoelaces. The community was in shock. Fear gripped the town. The tranquility of West Memphis was gone. The murders were a stark reminder that evil could touch even the most innocent. The community grappled with the unspeakable. How could this happen here? Who could have committed such a horrific act? The police faced immense pressure to find the killer. The media descended upon the town. Every detail of the case was poured over. The eyes of the nation were on West Memphis. The investigation began immediately. Police followed every lead, no matter how small. The crime scene was meticulously examined. The community, desperate for answers, offered theories of their own. Rumors spread like wildfire. Suspicions fell on those who seemed different. The spotlight turned to a group of teenagers. They were outsiders. Damian Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly Jr. became the focus of the investigation. Their interest in heavy metal music and the occult made them easy targets. The satanic panic of the 1990s played a role in shaping public perception. The teenagers were different. They dressed in black. They listened to music that some found disturbing. In the wake of the murders, these differences were amplified. The community, fueled by fear and grief, began to view them with suspicion. The pressure on the police intensified. They needed a break in the case. The eyes of the world were watching. The investigation took a turn. The focus shifted from finding the killer to building a case against the teenagers. The investigation centered on the three teenagers. They were interrogated for hours. The pressure was immense. Jesse Miskelly Jr., the youngest of the three, cracked. He confessed to the murders. Miskelly's confession became the cornerstone of the case. He implicated himself and his friends. Damian Eccles, with his interest in the occult, was portrayed as the ringleader. Jason Baldwin was painted as a willing participant. The trials of the West Memphis Three began in 1994. The prosecution presented a case that relied heavily on Miskelly's confession. They argued that the murders were part of a satanic ritual. The defense maintained the teenagers' innocence. They pointed to a lack of physical evidence and the questionable confession. The jury found the teenagers guilty. The verdict sent shockwaves through the community. Damian Eccles was sentenced to death. Jason Baldwin and Jesse Miskelly Jr. received life sentences. The case was far from over. The fight for justice had just begun. Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers, three names forever etched in the heart of a tragedy. Sons, brothers, friends. Their absence left a void in the lives of those who loved them. Candlelight vigils illuminated the night. Life, in its relentless way, went on. In the aftermath of the murders, West Memphis, Arkansas, became a town transformed. The sense of security, once a source of pride, had vanished. Fear, like a creeping vine, began to take root, twisting its way into the fabric of everyday life. Parents held their children a little closer. Playgrounds, once filled with the sounds of laughter, stood eerily quiet. The whispers started, fueled by speculation and dread. Who could have committed such a heinous act? Was it someone they knew? Someone lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike again? The community, once united in grief, found itself divided by suspicion. Accusatory eyes followed those who didn't quite fit in, those who dared to embrace a different lifestyle, a different set of beliefs. The satanic panic that gripped the nation in the 1990s cast a long shadow over West Memphis, fueling the flames of fear and prejudice. Lines were drawn, dividing neighbors, classmates, even families. The pressure to find the killer, to restore a sense of order and justice, mounted with each passing day. The investigation intensified, but with it came a growing sense of unease, a gnawing suspicion that the wrong people might be caught in the crosshairs. The national media descended upon West Memphis, drawn by the gruesome nature of the crime and the mystery surrounding it. Cameras captured every tear, every rumor, every accusation, broadcasting them into homes across the country. The case of the slain Cub Scouts became a national obsession. Headlines screamed from newsstands, proclaiming the horrors of the crime and speculating on the motives of the killer. Talk shows dissected every detail, fueling the flames of fear and suspicion. The media frenzy, while satisfying the public's insatiable appetite for news, also had the unintended consequence of influencing the investigation itself. The constant barrage of speculation and innuendo created an environment where objectivity was elusive. Theories, often rooted in fear and prejudice rather than facts, took hold in the public consciousness. The pressure on law enforcement to make an arrest, to provide answers and reassurance to a terrified community, grew with each passing day. The media, while playing a crucial role in disseminating information, also contributed to the creation of a narrative that would have far-reaching consequences. The lines between fact and fiction blurred, and the search for the truth became increasingly entangled in a web of speculation, rumor, and media-driven hysteria. As the investigation continued, the pressure on the West Memphis Police Department intensified. Every detective, every officer felt the weight of expectation bearing down on them. The victims were not just case files, they were children, their faces forever etched in their minds. The crime scene, a grim tableau of violence, yielded few clues. The lack of physical evidence of DNA, fingerprints, or a murder weapon only deepened the mystery. Leads were followed, witnesses interviewed, but the puzzle remained unsolved. The lack of answers only fueled the public's anxiety. The burden of proof, of delivering justice for 3 innocent lives cut short, weighed heavily on the shoulders of those tasked with finding the killer. Every dead end, every fruitless lead only amplified the pressure. The community demanded answers, and the police, desperate to provide them, found themselves at a crossroads. The need to solve the case, to restore a sense of order to a community reeling from the unthinkable, created a climate where shortcuts were taken, where assumptions were made, and where the presumption of innocence was sometimes overshadowed by the need for a swift resolution. The stage was set for a series of events that would forever alter the lives of 3 teenagers and call into question the very nature of justice itself. Robin Hood Hills, a place where imagination ran wild. Bikes became steeds, and sticks transformed into swords. The woods were a familiar comfort, but on May 6, 1993, the idyllic image was shattered. The woods became a place of horror, the laughter of children replaced by the murmur of police officers. Robin Hood Hills, once a symbol of innocence, became a chilling reminder of lurking evil. The discovery of the bodies was made by a volunteer search party. A group of men, their faces etched with worry and determination, had gathered early that morning, their hope fading with each passing hour. They ventured deep into the woods, their calls of the boys' names echoing through the trees. It was in a shallow, muddy creek bed obscured by a tangle of branches and leaves that they found them. 3 small bodies lying close together as if seeking comfort even in death. The sight, so incongruous with the tranquility of the woods, sent a collective gasp through the search party. The men stood frozen, their worst fears realized. The boys were naked, their bodies bruised and battered. Their hands were bound behind their backs with their own shoelaces. The scene, stark and brutal, spoke of a violence that defied comprehension. The innocence of childhood, so brutally extinguished, hung heavy in the air. News of the discovery spread like wildfire through the town. Parents rushed to the scene, their hearts pounding with a mixture of dread and hope. Hope that it wasn't their child, dread that it might be. The community, already reeling from the boy's disappearance, was dealt a blow from which it would never fully recover. As the police meticulously documented the crime scene, certain details emerged that sent chills down their spines. The boys hadn't just been murdered, they had been subjected to a level of brutality that suggested a rage, a hatred, beyond anything imaginable. Each detail, carefully recorded and analyzed, became a piece of a gruesome puzzle. The shoelaces, used to bind the boys' hands, stood out as a particularly chilling detail. They weren't just functional, they seemed deliberate, almost symbolic. Was it a way to control the boys, to silence their cries? Or was it something more sinister, a ritualistic act meant to inflict pain and humiliation? The way the bodies were positioned, their clothing discarded nearby, pointed to a crime that wasn't just about taking lives, it was about dehumanizing the victims, stripping them of their dignity, even in death. The killer had gone to great lengths to stage the scene, to send a message. But what was the message? And to whom was it directed? These questions haunted the investigators, fueling their determination to find the person responsible for such a heinous act. The shoelaces, a seemingly insignificant detail, became a symbol of the calculated cruelty of the crime, a chilling reminder that they were dealing with a killer who took pleasure in inflicting pain. Despite the brutality of the crime scene was strangely devoid of physical evidence. No fingerprints were found on the boys' bodies or their clothing, no murder weapon was recovered. The absence of such crucial evidence was baffling. The lack of a murder weapon was particularly perplexing. The boys had suffered blunt force trauma and multiple stab wounds. Yet despite an extensive search, no weapon was found. Had the killer been clever enough to dispose of it? Or was there something else at play? Establishing an accurate time of death is crucial in any homicide investigation. In the case of the West Memphis Three, determining the exact time of death proved to be a significant challenge. The discovery of their bodies, submerged in the creek, complicated matters. The cool running water had slowed decomposition, making it difficult to pinpoint an exact time of death. This timeline would later come into question as more evidence was uncovered. The inability to establish a definitive time of death opened the door for doubt and speculation. The police turned their attention to three teenagers, Damian Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly Jr. In the eyes of the police, they had their suspects. In a town like West Memphis, Arkansas, being different was often met with suspicion. Damian Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly Jr. were labeled as freaks and devil worshippers. The media, sensing a sensational story, descended upon West Memphis. With the weight of suspicion, the boys were brought in for questioning. Jesse Miskelly Jr., with an IQ of 72, was particularly vulnerable. Under intense pressure, he cracked and confessed to the murders. The trials of Damian Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly Jr. began in 1994. The prosecution painted the teenagers as devil-worshipping deviants. The defense argued the case was based on flimsy evidence and prejudice. Damian Eccles was sentenced to death, while Baldwin and Miskelly received life in prison. The case of the West Memphis Three sent shockwaves through the nation. The murders in West Memphis became linked to the national hysteria of the Satanic Panic. The prosecution wove a narrative of satanic ritual abuse into their case. The media provided a constant stream of sensational coverage. The defense argued that the media coverage had created a climate in which a fair trial was impossible. The prosecution's experts offered testimony about satanic rituals, but it lacked scientific basis. The defense countered with their own experts, challenging the prosecution's claims. Damian Eccles was sentenced to death, Baldwin and Miskelly to life in prison. The verdict sent shockwaves through West Memphis and beyond. The lack of physical evidence and the reliance on the satanic panic narrative troubled many. Support for the West Memphis Three began to grow. In the early 2000s, advances in DNA technology provided hope. New DNA testing found no evidence linking the teenagers to the crime scene. The fight for freedom for the West Memphis Three gained powerful new ammunition. Jesse Miskelly Jr.'s confession had been the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Miskelly recanted his confession, claiming coercion. The new DNA evidence raised serious doubts about the original investigation. The new evidence reignited the debate in West Memphis and beyond. Some argued the teenagers deserved to be released, while others remained convinced of their guilt. The community grappled with the same questions. Had justice been served? After years of legal battles, the case of the West Memphis Three took an unexpected turn in 2011. Faced with another trial, the defense and prosecution reached a controversial agreement, an Alford plea. This allowed them to maintain their innocence while acknowledging enough evidence to convict. On August 19, 2011, after 18 years, the West Memphis Three walked out as free men. The courtroom erupted in cheers. The Alford plea secured their freedom but left many questions unanswered. The release of the West Memphis Three did not bring closure to the case. The question of who killed Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers lingered in the air, a haunting reminder of the brutality of the crime and the imperfection of the justice system. The DNA evidence, while failing to link Eccles, Baldwin, and Miskelly to the crime scene, pointed to the possibility of another perpetrator. Terry Hobbs, the stepfather of victim Stevie Branch, remained a person of interest, but he maintained his innocence and was never charged. Over the years, various theories and suspects have been explored, but the case remains officially unsolved. The lack of a definitive answer has only fueled speculation and fueled the imaginations of those who continue to be captivated by the case. The search for the real killer, however, has been hampered by the passage of time, the loss of evidence, and the lingering shadow of the original investigation and trial. The West Memphis Three case serves as a stark reminder that the pursuit of justice is often a long and winding road, with no guarantee of reaching a satisfying conclusion. The case of the West Memphis Three is a tragedy on multiple levels. 3 young boys lost their lives in a horrific act of violence. 3 teenagers lost their freedom, spending their formative years behind bars for a crime they insisted they did not commit. The families of the victims, while finding some measure of peace in the convictions of Eccles, Baldwin, and Miskelly, were left to grapple with the possibility that the real killer might still be at large. The families of the accused, on the other hand, faced years of uncertainty, fighting tirelessly to clear their sons' names. The case also exposed deep flaws in the American justice system, the influence of media sensationalism, the fallibility of eyewitness testimony, the dangers of prosecutorial misconduct, and the persistence of prejudice all played a role in shaping the outcome of the trial. The West Memphis Three case serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that the pursuit of justice is not always straightforward, and that the presumption of innocence, a cornerstone of our legal system, can be fragile in the face of fear, prejudice, and a rush to judgment. The release of the West Memphis Three did not end the debate about their guilt or innocence. For some, the Alford plea was a necessary compromise. For others, it was a hollow victory. The case continues to be debated in law schools, documentaries, and online forums. Supporters point to the lack of physical evidence, the questionable confession of Jesse Miskelly Jr., and the prosecution's reliance on the satanic panic narrative. Those who believe in their guilt argue that the Alford plea was an admission of responsibility. They point to the brutality of the crimes and the fact that Eccles, Baldwin, and Miskelly have never been officially exonerated. The West Memphis Three case remains a Rorschach test for our beliefs about justice. It continues to fascinate, frustrate, and divide, a stark reminder that the truth is often elusive, and that justice, even when served, can be a bitter pill to swallow. The West Memphis Three case is a chilling reminder of fear, prejudice, and a flawed justice system. It began with the tragic deaths of 3 boys and spiraled into a legal maelstrom. The case highlights the dangers of rushing to judgment and overlooking evidence. It underscores the importance of a robust defense and a truly blind justice system. The fight for justice is never truly over. Subscribe to our channel to see more cases of crimes that shocked the world.